Hi again, my name is Peter. I'm a parishioner at Mary Queen of the Apostles Parish in Salem, Massachusetts. And this is my weekly reflection on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Sunday's responsorial psalm is from Psalm 85. The response itself is from verse 8 and provides the title for this reflection. The reading at Mass is from the verses following the response. Verse 8 reads, "Show us, Lord, your mercy. Grant us your salvation." Now, the response in the reading at Mass uses the word kindness instead of mercy. I prefer the translation of mercy. Well, it helps to understand the response we say at Mass in the context of the verses in the psalm that actually come before it. The Israelites were in exile from Jerusalem in Babylon at the time this psalm was written. In the first few verses of the psalm, they're calling out to God, saying things like, "Restore us, stop being displeased with us, stop being angry with us, and certainly you will again restore our life, that your people may rejoice in you." Now, when people suffer, or when things just don't go their way, they might wonder if God is displeased or angry with them. And it's hard to rejoice in God when feeling like God is displeased or angry. In this psalm, the Israelites beg God to restore them. So restore them to what, we might ask? Well, in the very beginning of this psalm, the psalmist reminds God that God once before restored the people of Israel. He released them from captivity in Egypt and led them to the promised land of Jerusalem. The psalmist says to God, "You forgave the guilt of your people, pardoned all of their sins. You withdrew all your wrath, turned back from your burning anger." And the psalmist is basically asking God to do this again. So how can this psalm help us reflect on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist? Well, you might remember that when the Israelites were freed from Egypt, they wandered for 40 years in the desert until they came to the promised land of Jerusalem. Along the way, God fed them with bread that came down from heaven, called manna. Now, we Christians today are like the freed Israelites, traveling in the desert of this world to the New Jerusalem in heaven. We're like the exiled Israelites who wish to be restored to Jerusalem, forgiven their sins in the same way. Now, Jesus told us in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, that he is the bread that came down from heaven. And by feeding on his body and blood during our journey here, he is restoring our lives. So when we worship at Mass this Sunday, whether in person or virtually, whether receiving communion or not, or performing a spiritual communion, consider praying the psalm's response one more time, like this. "Show us, Lord, your mercy. Grant us your salvation. Forgive our guilt. Pardon our sins. Restore our life, so that we, with all those in heaven, may rejoice in you." May God bless you, and see you next week.